Chapter 33. The particular chaos of separate pursuits. Crews did not always move together. This was something Kate had known for a long time, but had never fully examined, the way you do not examine things that are simply true. Some periods were fleet operations, some were individual, some were the specific middle state where everyone was technically doing something useful and nobody was in immediate danger, and the whole arrangement resembled less a military unit than a household where the occupants had quietly retreated to their respective corners. This was one of those periods. It suited her. She made a note of this for no one in particular and left it in her personal log unaddressed where it would remain. Graham and the rotary encoder. Arc Raiders had Graham. Not in the way it had Dimitri. Dimitri had Arc Raiders the way some people have a conviction, loudly without examining whether it was warranted until reality intervened. Graham had Arc Raiders the way a careful man approaches a problem he has decided to solve correctly. The problem was a rotary encoder. It was a crafting component. Tier 3. It dropped from a specific class of Arca unit in a specific region of the map, at a rate that the game clearly considered generous and Graham clearly considered an affront to his time. He wanted it for a quest. Not a combat quest, a construction quest. This was, in Graham's view, perfectly reasonable. He had explained this to the others on multiple occasions. It is a component, he said. You find the component. You build the thing. That's how it works. That is how most things work, Fuji agreed. So I need the encoder. You have been looking for 2 weeks. I know that, Graham said, in the tone of a man who knew exactly how long he had been looking and did not appreciate the metric being raised. The encoder was eventually found on a Tuesday. Graham said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "Right," and built the thing. The crew, in rotating configurations of 2 or 3, had joined him across those 2 weeks in loose and occasional solidarity. Fuji went most often, with the quiet competence of someone who found Arc Raiders mechanically interesting without becoming emotionally invested in it. Nick came and went, prone to taking a wrong corridor and then being very loud about it. Kate stood in occasionally when schedules aligned, running suppression from the high ground with the focused energy of someone who had decided that if she was going to be here, she was going to be efficient about it. None of them mentioned the encoder directly. They had all learned better. Dimitri and the minerals. Star Citizen, meanwhile, had Dimitri. More specifically, the asteroid belts outside Eula had Dimitri, his mining laser, his considerable ambition, and an increasingly complicated relationship with the game's geology. Mining had been his idea. He had presented it to the crew with the gravity of a man announcing a strategic shift. "We mine," he said. "We sell. We buy ships. We become pirates. It is the natural progression." Kate had looked at him for a moment. "The natural progression," she repeated. "Exactly." She had not argued, partly because she agreed with the general direction if not the specific framing, and partly because she had her own plans and Dimitri occupied with geology. Was Dimitri not creating diplomatic incidents near jump points? The arrangement, when it assembled, was as follows. The Bone Marrow held position at distance, running escort with Kate at the helm and Nick and Graham at the gun turrets, an assignment they had accepted with varying degrees of enthusiasm. When the mining operation needed hands, Nick and Graham would EVA across to Dimitri's ship, which also carried Fuji, and assist with the extraction work. Kate remained on the bridge of the Bone Marrow. Alone. In the quiet. With her feet on the console. And the radio on. What the bridge sounds like. The 9th house played. It drifted through the bridge speakers at a volume Kate had calibrated to the precise level that filled the silence without demanding attention. Not quite background, not quite foreground, just present, the way a fire was present in a room, warm and certain and entirely disinterested in whoever was listening. She had built that station. She allowed herself a moment of satisfaction about this, kept it brief, and returned to her current project, the Karak. Not acquiring the Karak, thinking about acquiring the Karak. This was, she had come to understand, its own distinct pleasure. The Karak was an explorer's ship, large, self-sufficient, built for long-range operations, carrying a snub fighter in its hangar bay and enough internal volume to run extended missions without resupply. It was beautiful in a functional way that Kate had always found more interesting than pure aesthetics. It was also expensive. She had the funds, approximately. She did not have them exactly. She opened the transaction screen. She looked at it. She closed the transaction screen. This was the third time this week. The wishing, she had noticed, had a texture to it that the having would not. Once acquired, the Karak would become a thing that needed crew, maintenance, a purpose, a problem to be solved. Before acquisition, it existed in a frictionless state of pure potential, available to be everything and therefore requiring nothing. She was aware this was a rationalization. She left the screen closed and turned up the radio slightly. Over the comms, the crew had commenced what she had come to think of as the operational texture of the mining run. This was distinct from either communication or conversation. It occupied a third category, which had no formal name, in which multiple people spoke simultaneously about different subjects at varying volumes, with the specific quality of people who had given up expecting to be heard and were simply transmitting. Nick was explaining to Fuji the correct procedure for the extraction laser. At the same moment, Fuji was explaining to Nick that he was already doing it. Graham was conducting a separate monologue about the asteroid's mineral composition in a tone that suggested he found it genuinely interesting. Dmitri was saying something in Russian that nobody was translating, periodically interrupted by the sound of a mining laser making contact with rock. Kate listened to all of this the way she listened to the radio, with approximately the same level of engagement. "Fuji," she said when there was a brief gap. "Yes. The extraction yield on the upper seam." "I know," Fuji said. "I am doing it." "I know you are," she said. "I was checking." "I know you were," Fuji said. This was sufficient. She returned to the Karak page and did not close it immediately this time, which she counted as progress. The atmosphere incident. The exact sequence of events was never fully established. This was partly because 3 people were talking at once when it happened, and partly because Dimitri's subsequent account introduced several details that did not correspond to the ship's logs, and partly because some things simply occurred in Star Citizen without requiring a coherent causal chain as a matter of the game's philosophical approach to physics. What was clear? There had been a panel. Dmitri had interacted with the panel. The panel, it transpired, had not been the panel he intended to interact with. The atmosphere reading on the bone marrow's display changed. Then the comms erupted. "Atmosphere," Fuji said, with the calm of a man who had already assessed the situation and was now simply narrating it for the record. "Atmosphere," Nick confirmed, with the quality of someone who had just understood what was happening and very much wished he had not. Graham said, "Oh." Dmitri said something that required no translation. Kate had both feet on the floor before the word atmosphere was fully out of Fuji's mouth. Her hands were already on the emergency EVA protocol. She looked at the readings. She looked at the trajectory of the ship, which was drifting slightly now. She looked at the crew positions on the overview. Then she put her feet back on the console. She had assessed the situation. The situation was, everyone needed to EVA back to the bone marrow. There was enough time, the distances were manageable. Fuji would coordinate it, Nick would be loud about it, Graham would say oh twice more. Dmitri would argue that it was the panel's fault, which was technically true in the way that most of Dimitri's positions were technically true, while missing a significant contextual element. She watched the EVA transponder signals moving across her display. Her shoulders started to shake. By the time the airlock cycled and 4 figures came through in various states of irritation and relief, she had composed herself. Mostly. There remained a quality to her expression that was, if examined closely, a smile with the volume turned all the way down. Dmitri looked at her. The panel, he said, with dignity, was incorrectly labeled. Of course it was, she said. This is a known issue. I'm sure it is. I will submit a report. I look forward to reading it. Dmitri sat down. The 9th house continued to play. Kate turned it up slightly. A note on DayZ. They were not playing DayZ. This was intentional. This was, Fuji had noted in his journal, a rest. Not a formal one. Nobody had declared a DayZ hiatus. Nobody had needed to. The consensus had formed the way certain crew decisions formed, not through discussion but through the quiet accumulation of everyone making the same choice independently. The spiders were there. The bloodsuckers were there. The zombies and the dinosaurs and the rain and the infections were there. The food scarcity, the abandoned farmhouses, the grey horizon that Dmitri had once described as aggressively depressing, all of it was there, precisely as Kate had configured it, waiting with the patient certainty of an environment that knew they would return. They would return. But not yet. Nick had expressed this most succinctly. I need to see a colour that isn't grey first. Nobody had disagreed. Contact. Arc Raiders this particular afternoon had Kate, Fuji, and Nick. It had been Fuji's idea, which was rare enough that Nick had noted it. Fuji rarely proposed things. He appeared, assessed, and participated. The proposal stage was generally someone else's territory. I want to try the northern extraction route, Fuji had said, which was all the proposal there was. They were 3 sectors in when the contact happened. It came fast. 2 raiders, unidentified, dropping from an elevated position with a confidence that suggested they had either good intelligence or no caution. The first burst of fire hit Nick's position. He went briefly behind cover, swearing in a constructive and focused way. Contact, Fuji said. I noticed, Nick said. Kate had not been targeted. Neither had Fuji. The 2 raiders, it was clear, had not seen them. They had seen Nick, who was, in fairness, the most visible member of any group he was part of. Kate did not move to engage. She tilted her head slightly. Fuji, from behind his own cover, observed this. Kate, he said. I'm thinking, she said. You are not going to shoot them yet. No, she said. Not yet. She opened a channel. What followed over the next 90 seconds was not a firefight. It was something more targeted than that. She told them in a tone that was almost pleasant that she found their ambush technique uninspiring. She told them that players who opened fire on lone targets from elevation typically did so because the mathematical odds of a fair engagement made them anxious. She explored, briefly, the question of whether their friends knew where they were tonight, and whether this was because they had friends, which she described as statistically uncertain given the evidence. She raised the possibility that somewhere, at this precise moment, someone who had expected better of them was experiencing the specific quiet disappointment that tended to accumulate over years into a settled and permanent assessment of a person's character. She said all of this at approximately the pace and tone of someone leaving a perfectly calibrated note. There was a silence on the channel. Then one of the raiders said something. Kate did not hear it. She had switched the channel to relay the moment she finished speaking, a habit carried from the bridge, and the incoming audio had already cut off when the words "get back to the kitchen" arrived through the speakers. It arrived to Fuji and Nick. Nick went very still. Fuji, whose face behind his mask communicated a great deal to those who knew how to read it, looked at Nick. Nick looked at Fuji. They had a conversation consisting entirely of expressions. Fuji's expression said, "She did not hear that." Nick's expression said, "Confirmed, she did not hear that." Fuji's expression said, "We will not mention it." Nick's expression said, "We will absolutely not mention it." Fuji's expression said, "Engage." They engaged. The two raiders were, within the following 40 seconds, entirely neutralized. It was a clean operation. Fuji was precise. Nick was louder than ideal but effective. Kate checked the display. "Good," she said. "Shall we continue?" "Yes," said Fuji. "Absolutely," said Nick, with the particular energy of someone who had narrowly avoided witnessing something and was grateful to be moving on. They continued. Neither of them ever mentioned it. This was, they had both independently calculated, the correct decision. A game unpaused. The conversation happened over the Bone Marrow's common channel, which meant Bublina heard it. Bublina heard everything. Nick had raised the subject obliquely, which for Nick meant raising it directly but prefacing it with, "So I was thinking." "So I was thinking," Nick said, "about Baldur's Gate." A pause. "The game," he added. "Yes," Fuji said, in the tone of someone who had known what was meant and was waiting to see where it went. "We haven't played in." Another pause. "A while," Nick said. "A year and 3 months," Fuji said. "Right. And 2 weeks." "Right. And 2 weeks." Nick appeared to consider this. "Kate finished it." "Kate finished it," Fuji agreed. "Kate finished it and did not tell us how it ended." "I provided a summary," Kate said from the other end of the channel. "The summary was satisfactory." "You romanced Shadowheart," Nick said. "Among others." "Among others," Nick repeated. "Who are the others, Kate?" "That information is classified." "Lae'zel," Fuji said. "Possibly." "Karlach," Nick said. "She was very charming," Kate said, without inflection. "And then," Nick said, carefully, "I heard some things. About the later game. About certain characters." A very brief silence. "Mizora," Fuji said. "I appreciate her commitment to a position," Kate said. Nick appeared to be constructing a sentence. Several attempts were visible in the rhythm of the comms. He eventually said, "She is a devil, Kate." "I'm aware of what she is." "An actual devil. Your point being?" "I don't have a point," Nick said. "I just want it on record." "It is on record," Bublina said helpfully. "I have logged it. Would you like me to log the Emperor as well?" The silence this time was different. "Bublina," Kate said. "Yes, my lady. Close the log." "The log is closed," Bublina said, in a tone suggesting that the log was not fully closed so much as temporarily unavailable for review. Fuji said, with the composure of a man filing information under useful and moving on, "We are resuming the playthrough." "We are resuming the playthrough," Kate confirmed. "My progress does not spoil yours. The choices diverge." "Our characters are level 1, Nick said. "Your characters are exactly where you left them." "We left them in a cave." "You did," Kate said. "It was a reasonable decision at the time. I recommend getting out of the cave." "When?" Fuji said. "When we have finished the current run," Kate said. "The mining, the encoder, when things settle." "Things do not typically settle," Fuji observed. "Then we will play anyway," Kate said. This was, from Kate, an unusual thing. An invitation, not framed as one, not delivered with warmth or ceremony. But it was there, underneath the phrasing, in the fact that she had said we. Nick appeared to have noticed this. He said nothing about it, because noticing things and saying them were two separate operations, and he had learned to run them independently. "Right," he said instead. "Baldur's Gate." Baldur's Gate, Fuji agreed. Bublina's display flickered with a warmth she did not vocalize. The ninth house played on. The Karak page remained open on Kate's console. She had not closed it.